In this one, we're going to take a look at how to build a simple Tailwind navbar. We're going to take it really slow, so if you're not familiar with Tailwind, I'm going to try my best to explain some of the classes and the process, how I did this. It's fully responsive, so we'll have breakpoints where it will change and look slightly different, and then we'll come down to our mobile area and you'll get like a little bit of a mobile menu, and I'll show you how to do that. We'll also pull in some stuff from hero icons, and then finally we'll jump out to Tailwind Play, where I can show you that it actually works exactly the same as it would, and you can try this out here. So even though I'm using a different platform, this will still work, and you guys will get an idea of how to build your own custom navbar using Tailwind CSS. Once again, guys, be sure to stick around for the entirety of the video as I give most of my insights towards the end of the lesson. All right, with that being said, let's jump in. Taking a look at the initial setup, you can see that I just have a basic Laravel project open, and I'm using the welcome blade. And basically what I've done is I've just added a couple of classes from Tailwind. So anti-alias, font sans, which basically just pulls in this font here, which is Nonito. And so I just made the entire background BG gray 100. And we can check that out in the browser. Looks exactly like this. And over here in the project, I'm just gonna run an npm run watch. Okay, so this will just basically build my project when I add assets and everything to it. So as we come over to here, it'll just refresh automatically. So I'll take this one slow. I won't use any of the Emmet to kind of like expedite this so you guys can follow along closely. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just build a header. Okay, so just use the header tag. So to start, I want this to be fixed, and I want it to be at the top 0. So meaning that it's not going to go away when I scroll down or go to the footer of the page. I want it to be left, and I want it to be 0. And initially, I want this to have a width of full. So my header is going to run completely all the way across the screen. Okay, and I'm going to use py3, which is going to give it some vertical padding, which in Tailwind refers to about 12 pixels or 0.75 rems. And then just to reset some of the browser stuff, I want a px of 0. And I would like the text in this case to be to the left. I want the font to be normal. So this is basically the font weight. And when you're using Tailwind, I want the leading to be 6. Okay, so this is basically like the line height. Next thing is I want the color. I want the text to be neutral. So Tailwind comes with some pre-built-in colors, and I'm gonna go for neutral 800. You can see this here. It's just kind of a, like a dark gray text. And then lastly, I'd like the nav to have a shadow. When we use shadow in Tailwind, there is the box shadow, which is the shadow of an element. It comes in different variations. You can be like small, medium, large, XL, or you could use drop shadow. But for now, we're gonna do shadow. And we're just gonna jump into the browser just to see what this looks like. We're gonna give it a quick refresh. And you can see nothing's really glamorous here. We just have this empty HTML element with just a drop shadow. Okay, next up we're gonna add the nav element, okay? So a simple nav tag, HTML tag, and I'm gonna add a class to it as well. So for this navigation, I would like the class attribute to have a BG, which is a background of white, and px3 is like padding left and right. It's the same measurement as py, it's just 12 pixels left and right is the padding, and it's 0.75 rems if you want to get really technical. We're going to make this navbar responsive as we go along. So for now, when it's in small, which is SM in Tailwind, we're going to want it to be px4. So when we're talking about responsive design and we use SM, we're saying we want a minimum width of 640 pixels. So if you're familiar with CSS, this is like using a media query and saying, min width 640 pixels. So inside that nav, I'm going to create a div. Let's line up this div a little bit. I'm going to move this up to the top here. Okay, so within this div, we're going to add another class attribute, and we're going to say we want this div to use the container, which is a component for fixing an element's width to the current breakpoint. So for right now, we want this to be 100%. The width is going to be 100% across this div. And then we want to center the contents in the container. So we're going to use MX Auto, and we're going to use Flex. If you're not familiar with Flex, I will try to cover that a little later on in this channel. Just think of it like you're controlling how items grow and shrink. So there is a bunch of classes and properties around that. So it's like this Flex 1, this Flex Auto, Flex None. If you're familiar with CSS, this will make a lot of sense. And we're going to add this thing called Flex Wrap, which is basically controlling how Flex items wrap, how they appear when they're shrinking or growing. And we want the items to be centered, and we want these to be justified between. So basically we want relatively equal amount of space between the content inside of this container. Now I'm just gonna space this out and give a little commenting just so that you guys can, I guess, get a little bit of a clearer picture around, the structure of this navigation bar. So within this div, the reason that we created it this way is we're going to throw in our brand or your logo or whatever you have or you want to place in here. And then down here, we'll add just a simple anchor tag. Inside of this, you're going to need a bunch of Tailwind classes as well. We're going to use flex and we're going to use item center. And then we're going to use the image tag, the HTML image tag. And the source that I'm going to be using is wherever your brand image is located. I'm using a Laravel project with Vite, but you can just point to a relative URL or something like that. So in this case, it's going to be something like this. It'll be Vite, and we're going to use the asset to point to where the asset is. And then all I did here was add a simple alt tag and just said your logo. Okay, so once your image is added, we need to add a class attribute to the image tag and just push it to the right a little bit. So using margin right 3, and we're going to give it a height of h6. And when it's small, we're going to give it a bigger height. So we're going to say smh9. And once again, these are Tailwind classes referring to the height. So when it's small, it's about 36 pixels. And when it's in the larger or web, desktop, or tablet mode, we're sitting around 24 pixels. All right, let's give it a quick refresh. Check it out.
Hey guys, what's up? Kevin here. I just want to give a big shout out to my subscribers. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Be sure to give the videos a like, a thumbs up, and start a conversation. Much appreciated. Now let's get back to the video.
So here's what it looks like in the browser. We're just getting started, but at least we know this is working. For now, I think that might be a little bit big. So you know what I'll do? I'll make this one, let's say this one should be 5 and we'll make this one 6. So when we hit mobile. Okay, here's what we have so far and it's coming along. Let's jump back into our editor. I guess one more thing I want to add here. When I hover on the actual logo, I just want to make the cursor and I want to make it pointer. So right now, before I did that, when I hovered on the logo, now it's a little hand, so it gives the indication that you can click on it and it'll go somewhere. So within the same div, we're going to work on the mobile menu button. Down here, you'd want to use the HTML button tag. We're going to give it a type, so some of the attributes that it requires. So the type is button, and we're going to add a class attribute here. And then we're going to add a bunch of classes to this button. So the Tailwind classes that we're looking for are margin left 3. Then we're going to use inline flex. We want the item center. We want rounded. So basically we want this button to have a rounded edge. And in this case, I'd like it to be large. We're going to place like an SVG icon within the button, and then the borders around the button are going to be rounded. And we're going to give it a padding of 2. So P in Tailwind is for padding, and you have increments moving up once again. So P2 in Tailwind, as far as measurement goes, it'll be about 8 pixels or so, or 0.5 rem. I would like the text color to be though gray, and I want it to be about 500. And lastly, when we hover over this icon, we want it to have a BG of gray. So we're gonna make it BG, and we're gonna say gray, and we're gonna choose 100. Tailwind does stuff around focus rings, and you could do different things, but we're just going to make it fairly simple. So we'll stop here as far as styling this button. Inside of the button, however, we're going to use the HTML SVG tag. What we're going to do is we're going to jump out to the browser, and Tailwind has a bunch of supported icons. I think they're called hero icons. So here we are with the hero icons version 2.0. We're going to look for, they're called bars or hamburger menus or whatever you want to call them. You can pick whatever you want. So we're going to copy the SVG. We're going to click on that, and we're just going to paste this inside of the button. It comes with a class of W6, so it's already set up. So we'll see how big that is. And if it's too big, then we'll adjust it. So I believe as of Tailwind 3.2, you can have some of these attributes here in the class. So you could use something like, I think it's fill, and then you can fill this SVG whatever color is available or whatever colors you choose in your Tailwind config. We could say fill none, and then we could just remove this because Tailwind's actually doing that for us. But if you feel better using the SVG attributes, the HTML attributes, then it'll do the same thing. Another thing that's commonly done depending on what you're doing is you'd like to let screen readers know what this button does, because for accessibility purposes, you could say create a span tag, and within that span tag, you can create a class, and Tailwind has one called SR only, so for screen readers only. So this won't show up, it'll be hidden, and you can tell the screen readers what this button is actually doing. So this is going to open, the mobile menu. I recommend doing something like this. It's pretty helpful. Okay, so now that we got our mobile menu button, we have the brand, we kind of have our navigation inside of this div tag here, and you could call this, we could give a little more reference. Like I wouldn't over comment, your code and stuff like that, but just for you guys following along, I'm just going to do this. This could be like navigation container, just so you can follow the structure, right? So you have like just the header, then you have your nav inside that header. Then you have a div container that contains some contents that you're going to fill in here. So the next thing up in that container, so we're going to add the navigation menu items. It's nice to do this sometimes because when you're just trying to figure out your structure and what's going on, and maybe you have to come back a few months later or whatever, you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to use a little emmet here. So I'm going to say div. Inside that div, I'm going to create an unordered list. And inside that unordered list, I'm going to make list items. I'm going to make 5 of them. So I wanted to show you guys this too. I said I wouldn't go into a lot of emmet. I really won't. But it just helps speed up the workflow for certain things. So I could have typed this out and it might have been a little time consuming. If you're new, I wanted to go through it relatively slowly with this tutorial so you guys can like figure out how it's done. But if you check out the emmet videos on the channel, it will help you guys expedite your workflow for building these things fairly quickly. So while I'm still in here, so depending on your editor, I'm just going to multiple select inside of these list items, and I'm going to create an anchor tag. And then all I'm going to do is just kind of clean this up a little bit so it's easier to read. You don't have to do this, but it does help, making the code a little bit easier to read. And you'll see as we start doing this, it becomes, a habit or second nature. So the other interesting thing is with these menu items, they're going to be kind of repetitive, right? So I wanted to show you this technique of how to add and kind of separate your code and kind of get these things going. But when we build one of them, we're really just going to copy and paste and repeat the pattern. Okay, so we only need to work with one for now, and then we'll just like repeat it and then change out a few nuances to make it slightly different from the first one. So in the opening div here, we're going to create a class attribute, and we want this to be hidden. When it's small, when it's in the mobile size, this menu will be hidden. Okay, this won't be available. And we're going to set a media response, or the tablet size, which is around 768 pixels. We're going to say, hey, make this block. And if you're not familiar with block or inline block or flex, there'll be videos on this channel around that, but just follow along for now. Also at the medium breakpoint, we're going to say we want the width to be auto. So use up as much space as possible. Next up is the unordered list. So we're going to add a few classes to this as well. I would like a margin top of 4. And then I would like, padding 4. At the medium breakpoint, or 768 pixels, I'm going to say margin top should be 0. So we're just kind of setting up something for the responsive or the mobile point of this. And medium, I would like this to be flex row. So basically, when it's larger than 768 pixels, we want this to be running horizontally, right? And also medium, I want them to be spaced out. There's a thing called space X, and I'm going to set the value to 8. We're evenly spacing out these menu items, which is around 32 pixels, or give or take. Also at the medium breakpoint, we would like the text to be small. And also at the medium breakpoint, we would like the font to be medium. So this is the weight of the font. And we're going to go back to here around the MT4 part. So initially we want these to be flex as well. And we'd like the flex column. So we want it to be flex col. And we can make it rounded if we'd like. We say something like rounded -LG. That would mean that the menu items would have a large border radius around them. So we don't have to do too much around the list items. We don't have to add any classes there. We're going to add the class attribute again, and then we're going to make block. So we want this at the mobile level to be using the Tailwind block class. And we want to have the cursor set to pointer. So when we hover over these anchor links, it looks like, that hand will come up and it'll go somewhere. And we're going to set PY to 4, and we're going to set PX. We'll make that 2. And we want the text to be extra small in this case. It'll be XS for extra small in Tailwind. Then we want it to be uppercase. We want to do something around the line height. So we're going to say letting, and we're going to make it 6. And in Tailwind, there's a thing called tracking. And what tracking refers to in Tailwind, if you're familiar with CSS, it's just a letter spacing, how much spacing there is between each character. So we're going to say tracking on this one, and I want it to be the widest. You can experiment with these guys and just try to find out what looks the best for whatever you're trying to design. And we're going to make the text gray, and we're going to shoot for 700. Actually, you know what? let's make this black. And once you start using Tailwind, you start to notice that, like, you know, we haven't jumped to the browser, and let's go check this out real quickly. You start to get a picture in your mind of what it is that you're trying to build. You can figure it out and get an idea without even looking back and forth to this. This is the About button that we're creating here. What we're doing right now, we're just styling it the way we want. I'm going to add a couple hover states to it, so when we hover over it, it'll be like, you know, let's say like a red color or something like that, and we're going to say 500. When I'm here and I refresh in the browser, when I hover over it, then the text turns red. So this is still visible, and that's okay. We're going to find a way to hide this when we're in desktop mode or tablet or at the medium breakpoint, 768 pixels or larger. It shouldn't be visible. This is pretty much it for that. So what we're going to do here now that we have one list item or one menu item created, we're just going to copy and paste this. Let's say 5 times, because maybe you have 5 items in your menu. We could do this. Let's do 4 just to see what we have going on here. So I just kind of expanded them and closed them again. But, you know, the second item could be, let's say, blog, and the third item could be somewhere around your services or something like that. And the fourth item could be like contact us. If you go back to your browser, and you'll see that it's coming along now. We're now getting a better shape of what our, you know, responsive navigation bar is with Tailwind. So it's not too tricky, but it does take some practice. And once you figure this out, you'll be able to make some really exotic and interesting menu bars by using Tailwind. It's that utility first approach, so it's all in line, and it does look a little long and, you know, kind of messy, but there's ways to clean this up and make it a little bit cleaner. But it's going to be out of the scope of this video, but I want to get you guys just started because there was a lot of questions around like how to build, you know, like a menu or Navbar or something like that in Tailwind, or how do I get started. And I'm going to do my best to try to just make sure you guys know how to do that. Let's talk about how we get this item here to disappear. When it's in mobile, we're going to set it over here to like W full. I wanted to show you this separately. Is when you hit that and we refresh, when we go to inspect, when we get down to this point, notice how it kind of like just disappears here, but it's still in the largest state, the largest breakpoint. If we go down to what 768 pixels would be, it pops up. Less than 768 to 767, you know, everything else disappears because we set it at the medium breakpoint. You'd have to think like, how do we get rid of this one here? Because it's just sitting here, right? So it had to be hidden at any breakpoint greater than 768. So let's just make this large one more time. So let's just scroll up here to our mobile button. Let's add one more comment real quickly here. So it's kind of the same approach as down here, but what we're going to say is, you know, MD, I'm going to say hidden. Now this could be done in so many different ways, but I'm going to do it this way for now. When we hit the medium breakpoint, 768 pixels, you won't see this. If we go smaller than that, we'll definitely see it. It'll be inline. So inside of our browser, we don't see it anymore. It's missing. If we go to inspect and we're at a certain breakpoint, we start scaling down, and then you notice that it's actually just appears just below 768. So if we go to 760, let's see, 768, not there, 767 or lower, we'll see it. So now that we have our menu items all set, I'm just gonna, you know, minimize the unordered list here. One thing that we noted, like we could quit here, and you notice that the header, the background, there's this little gap here, right? All you have to do at the end of the day is go to the top of your class with the header and the BG. We didn't give it a background, right? So if we were to give it a background, that blue area will fill up. And I wanted to show you that because, you know, it's kind of deceptive that you don't see that there is something here. This is within a container. So the header needs its own, you know, background, and it blends in with the navigation to give it like that look where it's all one piece. But it's multiple components, right? Multiple tags. Keep that in mind when you're building. And now it doesn't have to be built this way. There's so many ways to do this, but I'm just showing you one approach. And now that we're looking at it, you know, all of a sudden this logo looks a little bit small. And the beautiful thing about Tailwind is that you can just jump inside of your HTML and just increase the size. You can say, hey, let's make it 6. Let's make this one 8. And you can just go and check it out. It's really easy to change things. But one thing that you're probably missing is when you scroll down to mobile, you can't see the menu items, right? They're missing. So you'd like these menu items to be displayed in a vertical fashion here, right below this. And you can add some things around that. So let's take care of that next. So we'll just keep it in mobile, and I'm going to pick a default thing. So let's say iPhone 12 Pro. Okay. So we can get a better look at this. So this is what it would look like around this. If we were to rotate this, this is what it looks like. Okay. So fully responsive, as you can see. Let's jump back over to our editor. We'll start a new div section. Okay, so we can clean this up. I can minimize this div here. This div will contain the mobile navigation. I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to add a class to this div. Okay, so we're going to add the class attribute. And I want this to be hidden. So when this is small, I want to hide this. Okay, so if I had a media min width of 640, I don't want to see this. Okay, I want it to be hidden. And once again, I'm going to use a little bit of emit here. And all I did is I created a div. And with inside that div, I've added an anchor tag. Okay, and we can repeat these anchor tags as many as needed for whatever menu items you have. So I'm going to copy this right now. I'm just going to paste this here. Semantically, this is not a great approach. I would even switch it up and make this an unordered list of things, or even another navigation. But for now, for this example, I'm not going to get too technical, but we're just going to do it like this for now. Okay, so we're going to use a class attribute again, and we're going to use the space Y, so the vertical space, so we want them evenly spaced, which is about like 4 pixels. And Tailwind does provide documentation on how these conversions or how these numbers work. We'd like the PX, or padding left and right, to be 2. And I'm gonna give it a little bit of padding bottom. I'm gonna say 3. And then within side of this anchor tag, I'm gonna add the class attribute. I'm gonna set the BG, and I'm gonna make it red. Let's say 700, because it's going to be the active one. Let's just say the first one's active. Let's say we're on the about page, and we're going to make it active. And I want the text, once again, to be uppercased. Okay, so I'll say uppercase as far as that goes with Tailwind. I want it to be at the block level, so it spans the whole entire width of the container that it's in. I want a border radius, and I want to set it to about medium. PX 3, PY 2, right? That gives it some room to breathe. So basically we're padding the text around these settings. I want the font to be medium, and I would like the text color to be white. Okay, so let's go check this out. We got this, secondary nav starting to take shape. So now that we kind of have the basis of this one, we can kind of copy and paste and repeat this, and then change some of the classes to fit the mobile menu items that are not active or not selected. So we're going to do this as many times as we have menu items. Now you'll see what space Y does. It kind of like spaces them out evenly by 4 pixels. If you need more space, you can do so, but they're all active and we don't want that. We're going to say when we hover, we want the background to be red, but the default background, we're going to keep a different color. So we're going to say BG in this case is just going to be black. Okay, so let's just take a look at what it looks like. The default background is black, but when we hover over these ones here, they change to be red. Okay, and the active one is actually red. We could add, say like a margin top of 24. We'll see how that goes. And then we check it out. And that's a lot, right? So then the nice thing about Tailwind is you can check these classes and see how, easy it is to modify them and check it out. So that's not too bad, but it'd actually stick around something like 8 or whatever. But you can pick and choose. I'm just trying to show you an approach that you can use to make your mobile menu, right? So let's see what happens if we actually make this responsive and we try to change it. So kind of interesting, right around here at 767, we should see that, that mobile menu, but we don't. We go to 640 and then it shows up. So there's kind of a gap between, what happens around the medium breakpoint, which is right here, and around this point. So that's an easy fix. Instead of saying hidden on small, we can say MD hidden. Okay, so we picked the wrong breakpoint on that one. So here we are. And then we're at that, see that medium one? When we just hit medium, it shows up, and then it keeps going to small, and then it hits anything bigger than that, and it gets a little bit bigger. And you can clean this up and make this a lot less Tailwind classes inside of your HTML. So there's a bunch of things you can do around transitions or even animations or things like that. But just to keep this fairly simple, you guys can now see how straightforward it is to build. And you can modify this and you can add a button towards the end. Maybe perhaps over here you have some login or sign in buttons, or you want to shift these around and put them in a different place. Or maybe you want the logo in the middle versus off to the left. And just to see how it works in a responsive state, you can say, okay, look, here's 1080p. That's what it looks like, right? So any monitor that's 1920 by 1080. And if you jump up to 2K, it does its thing. It maintains the width of the container that you set, right? So if we go up to something like, say, 4K, it still stays here. If you wanted this to be a little bit fluid and you wanted to run end to end while you do something like this, instead of container, you would change this to W full. And as you can see, it'll run end to end depending on what size the screen is. And even then you can decide, like, you know what, it does run end to end, but I would like a little more padding. And you can add that at different breakpoints, and you see it gets tucked in a little bit more. So there's lots of options here. I hope you enjoyed that one, guys. I took this one a little slow because I wanted everyone to kind of understand this who's never kind of, used Tailwind and kind of just want to figure it out. I did have some questions around how to build a navbar or a header, and I'm using Laravel, but this will work exactly the same for any standard project. So let's check it out. There's a thing called Tailwind Play. We can jump in here into Tailwind Play. We can copy our code. Now, the only thing that's going to be kind of odd is the comments, but that's because they're restricted for blade files. But it's going to look a little wonky because you have these comments in here. We're going to do a quick tidy, and it's not going to have the actual path to your logo. So once we just kind of clean up the comments, you'll actually see that this will work wherever you need it, right? So when you hit that small breakpoint, you then have that, and it looks exactly the same as it did in my project. Keep that in mind. This is a good place to come and play and practice around with Tailwind and figure things out. I highly recommend that you check it out. Okay, that's it for this one, guys. I hope you found that useful. And I think I'm going to do another one like this around how to build a login. Let me know in the comments if that's something you guys are interested in. And I will post a video like that in the future.